enough about that. Enough about boomers. Let's talk about some fantasy football playoffs here in Fantasy League. Oh, I guess.
Do we have to?
For me, at least. But as you can see, the playoffs are set in our celebrity division. Team FaZe Clan will face off against the first-timer, Candace Patton, the Oracle. And in the Experts division, the rank and file, number 1 seed taking on the Fantasy Footballers.
You got some injuries, though.
Man, we'll get into those.
Was I not supposed to mention that? I'm sorry.
No.
Minor details in that.
It bums me out a little bit, but we'll get to our matchup in a second. Let's look at the FaZe Clan matchup against Candace Patton. And it is a reminder, this matchup right here is for $25,000 to their respective charity. So somebody's charity is going to take home $25,000, which is huge. And you can see both of these teams are locked and loaded. One player going tonight for Candace Patton, of course, will be Mark Andrews. But let's take a look at some of those other matchups here and some of those other big key moments. We'll start at the quarterback position because you saw right there, Candace Patton loves to do the crowdsourcing. Mm-hmm. She's going with
She's done well with it, though.
It's proven
she's done a
great
to be
job.
Successful for her this year.
And it's going to be Kyler Murray against
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
And Taylor, why don't you get us kicked off?
Wow.
On Jimmy G.
If you insist. I mean, I guess.
Can she be unbiased in her Jimmy Garoppolo analysis?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, after he had such a phenomenal performance last week against the Saints, it's hard not to put Jimmy Garoppolo in your lineup. Not to mention, he's got a very favorable matchup this week against the Atlanta Falcons, who have given up 24 touchdown passes all year. And in the last 4 games, Jimmy Garoppolo has had 9 touchdown passes. The Falcons have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks all year. So Jimmy Garoppolo is in a great spot this week, especially after going into New Orleans last week and having that kind of performance. You know he's going to do very well against this Falcons defense.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are concerned because that Carolina Panthers defense gives up a lot of production to the running backs. But you know what? You want an offense that's going to score a lot of points. And what about the Cardinals? Kyler Murray, do you think that he's going to score a lot of points this week?
You know, I know on paper everybody's excited about this matchup. You got 2 Heisman Trophy winners, Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, 2 guys who were teammates at Oklahoma. Although there's something that says that's just sort of gnawing at me that worries about Kyler Murray this week. I mean, you look, the Browns have only given up 1 300-yard passer this year. That was to Russell Wilson way back in week 6. Only 2 quarterbacks have had more than 2 touchdown passes in a game. That was one was Marcus Mariota, of all people. The other was Lamar Jackson. So there is some concern there. The other part of it is the Steelers, or not the Steelers, the Browns have not given up a lot of rushing yards to quarterbacks. A quarter of the rushing yards that they've allowed this year came from Lamar Jackson early in the season. Right. So I worry that they might clamp down on Kyler a little bit more than we expect.
I'm with you. And we also see with these 2 teams, they were the first 2 picks in the draft, which means 2 of the top running backs came off the board. And Saquon Barkley, the first overall selection, that's who Candace is counting on this week. Should she be worried? Because he hasn't really played as well as you would think for a number 1 draft pick.
He hasn't, except he is number 13th among running backs. Obviously, you projected him to be a lot stronger than that, except he is going up against a favorable matchup this week. And so, yeah, there's never a situation in which you're not going to play Saquon Barkley. He's going up against the Miami Dolphins, which couldn't be a better matchup for him. They're allowing the most fantasy points to running backs this season and most rushing yards to running backs this season. So Saquon Barkley is in a great position this week to kind of explode and have one of those explosive performances.
And Kimmy, Christian McCaffrey, some people think that he could be worth 2 fantasy players with the consistent production that he puts out there. What do you see from him?
I think if I could have Christian McCaffrey on my roster, I would be in the playoffs and not you.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's okay. You are good. You're like, well, I don't know.
He's
about
like
that.
one of those players that can get you by and just you should be winning your fantasy league if you have Christian McCaffrey.
I have a league with OBJ, and somebody was asking today, like, how did you get to the playoffs with OBJ? And I'm like, Christian McCaffrey. So what do we see out of him this week?
So obviously any fantasy owner knows that you are not putting Christian McCaffrey on your bench. You are playing him each and every week. He's going against the Seahawks. So I think when you see Kyle Allen and what they're able to do on the Panthers side of the ball going against Russell Wilson, it's going to be an offensive shootout. So you can expect a lot of high-scoring points for this game. He's ranking number 1 at his position, averaging 29 points a game. And the Seahawks are not so great against running back. They've allowed 12 rushing touchdowns this season, which is top 4 in the NFL. So I think it's a favorable matchup. There's going to be a lot of points on the board. And I have a prediction that Christian McCaffrey may just get some of those touchdowns for the Panthers. So if you are his fantasy owner, you should be in a good position, as you have been this entire season.
As they have been the whole year. As Marcus Grant predicted back in August, July, maybe June, Christian McCaffrey should be the one.
You really have been calling it the entire time.
If Candace would have taken your advice and taken Christian McCaffrey, she would have been in a pretty comfortable place. But she did do a nice job at the wide receiver position when she drafted Chris Godwin. Now, this week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be without Mike Evans, but Chris Godwin, I think, could have a very good game. And I know that a lot of people are looking at the waiver wire. Maybe you're going to go out and pick up Rashad Perriman or something like that. But I do not have any hesitation. I don't have any fear that Mike Evans' absence will have an impact on Chris Godwin because he plays so well out of the slot. And that's where you're really going to be able to take advantage of it. I think that Rashad Perriman could end up being a guy who does not benefit from Mike Evans being there because in a lot of cases, he was drawing attention away from him, which is why he's been able to get a lot of targets over the last couple of games. So I think Chris Godwin is safe. What about Julian Edelman, the number one receiver for the New England Patriots?
The number one receiver for the New England Patriots. So when we look at the Patriots, the last few weeks have been a little bit iffy for the offense. This is something that Tom Brady is not used to. You can see his frustration on the sideline. But the guy that he is relying on each and every week is Julian Edelman. So I think he is a safe start. He's had 21 plus fantasy points in 2 straight. And the Bengals are really bad against the slot. I know you said that with Chris Carson, but they're allowing 20 points to slot receivers. So I think he's an easy start. But fun stat here, the Patriots are only averaging 17 points per game since week 9, and that is the 3rd fewest in the NFL. I think we're always used to the Patriots being on top. So to see them kind of slide down to the lower tier in the NFL for offensive scoring is kind of surprising.
That whole offense right now is Julian Edelman and James White. Like, that's it. That's pretty much it.
That's it. What about this matchup? Who do you think is going to win between Candace and the FaZe clan?
You know what? I think Candace will squeak by. I mean, she's been good so much all year long. I think Saquon, this might be a Saquon eruption week. We haven't really had one so far this season. He hasn't scored a touchdown since, I think, week 2, maybe?
I got you, yeah.
It's been a while. So I feel like this is a Saquon blow-up week, and I think she somehow squeaks through, which I think would be great. You know, her first time playing fantasy football to get all the way to the championship would be awesome.
She will win a mini championship with $25,000. Who do you got?
I'm going to go with Candace as well.
Candace.
I'm all Candace. I think that's like the typical fantasy football story. Your first time playing fantasy, it's kind of daunting
we all
taking
kind of talked about it
but
in the
it's
draft
fun.
Too. We're like, we know that Candace is all of a sudden going to get to the playoffs and then win it all because it's her first year of playing.
She's got the fever, definitely. So we're all we'll make it unanimous. We're all pulling and picking Candace. But let's talk about the fantasy footballers against me, your commissioner. And I know that Mike Wright reached out to me today and was a little bit worried about Lamar Jackson. So they're going to be watching Thursday night's game with an extreme interest. And Jameis Winston is sitting up at the top of their board, battling a thumb injury. I might go and pick up and drop every quarterback in the league. So if something goofy happens. And what is up with this letter? Am I supposed to pick this letter up? Oh my gosh.
Beautiful handwriting.
Yes. So there it is. There's the camera.
It looks like a love letter, Rank.
I think it is.
I have a feeling it's not going to be.
I hope there's not a scorpion in it.
That would be bad. Make for great TV, though.
Look at him. He's opening it so delicately. What does it say?
Dear Adam. Wow.
That's not nice.
That's just rude.
That is rude.
But they said with love.
That is rude.
I said that I was huge fans of you guys and your little podcast thing that you guys have been doing in your rubber. All right, let's get into the matchup. I will start off at the running back position. I have Aaron Jones, my 3rd round selection. As tough as it is for me to root for a Green Bay Packer, I have been delighted with this selection. I'm not delighted that he's actually made Aaron Rodgers relevant again, but you know what? If it's for the benefit of my fantasy team, sometimes you have to make those decisions. This week, they've got the Chicago Bears, and I know that everybody's been saying this a lot over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, that the Bears have been struggling, but now Akeem Hicks is coming back, baby. So I'm torn. What about them? They got Chris Carson.
They've got Chris Carson, so that's going to be very, very, very tough for him not to have a high-scoring game because Carolina is allowing the most fantasy points per games to running back. They're allowing more touchdowns to running back than any other team. Moreover, they're allowing the most since the 1986 Bucs, so that's going to be huge. And just based on volume alone, Chris Carson is averaging just over 21 touches per game. So that's more than, it's the 6th most in the NFL. And now that Rashad Penny has been placed on IR, it's just going to give more volume to Chris Carson.
You seem very happy about all this. Chris Carson scores
No,
a minimum.
of course I want Adam to
scores
win.
a minimum of 3 touchdowns in this game. But actually in this game too, I've got DJ Moore, a player that I'd been debating. It seemed week in and week out with him and Calvin Ridley, who was going to be my wide receiver 3. Well, thanks to injuries, DJ Moore is going to be my wide receiver 2. So I don't even have a debate anymore. I have to get him into the lineup. So coming into the season, I had said that this was going to be the best receiver that Cam Newton has ever played with since Steve Smith. I was wrong because it's the best receiver Kyle Allen has ever played with ever in his entire NFL career. But Kimmy, what do you think about Julio Jones this week going up against San Francisco?
So I know this may be a point of contention since you did have Calvin Ridley and he has now been placed on IR, but that gives all of the volume and opportunity for Julio Jones. So I think he's an easy start. He's averaging 16 fantasy points on the season. So for a wide receiver, it's pretty darn good. Like I said, with Calvin Ridley being on IR, I think he's in a good spot. And the 49ers, it's a tough matchup, but last week they gave 30 fantasy points to Michael Thomas. So Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, a little bit hard to compare there, but I think if he goes out and he has some good touches and opportunities, he could put some points out on the board.
It's all going to go to Zacchaeus. That's what they're going to do.
Zacchaeus, man. He's the guy to get.
Throw us all off.
Zacchaeus. And anyways, what about the tight end position? I used my first-round draft pick on Travis Kelce. We've talked about that strategy at great length. And I like this matchup this week against the Denver Broncos. I think that this is going to be an opportunity for him to really kind of exert himself. I know that he hasn't been the monster that I envisioned he could be, perhaps if we would have had a healthy Patrick Mahomes for the entire season. But when you're doing stuff like this, I love that read option. I was sitting there watching that. I know it came in a game that didn't really matter, but I still think that I have the edge with Travis Kelce over Darren Waller.
Yeah, I think you do. But Waller's got he's got a good matchup in the sense that the Jaguar defense has just gone south. But I think that's the thing. They may run a lot, whether it's Josh Jacobs or DeAndre Washington. This could be a heavy run game for the Raiders. It's been weird because Waller started off like a house on fire. Then he sort of disappeared middle of the season. He started to come back a little bit. And so he will certainly get targets in this offense. But I think if you're going 1v1 with the tight ends, you have a definite advantage with Travis Kelce.
And I'm just going to assume that you're all rooting for me in this matchup. So we're just going to go to break.